Looks like I'm in the right place this morning. I love that. Thank you, Soul 21. Thank you, Celebration Band, for holding us down so wonderfully, as you always do. I want to move right in. I'm looking at the time, and we don't want to hold you too long, but I do have a few things to talk about this morning. So good morning, everybody. How you feeling? Awesome. It's so good to see you all. So as a review, in week 1, where did we start? We started with the message, Always Innocent. As we're looking at the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, that's a tongue twister for me sometimes. Paramahansa Yogananda, as we're looking at his life and using the book Autobiography of a Yogi, I started with his early years. And I talked about the idea that when we look at revered figures in history, we always, many times, want to look at their early years to see if there was some glimpse of their greatness, even as they were young. And I talked about, we have that story with George Washington. If you look at the Gnostic texts, you have the infancy Gospels, which tell stories about Jesus as a child, which most people don't normally get to hear. And they give you a glimpse of potentially his greatness as a child. And I talked about this ultimate idea that we look at them and we look at what Yogananda did as a child and we say they had childlike faith, right? And actually that childlike faith, that innocence still dwells within us. The truth is we are always innocent, and it's out of knowing our innocence that we actually can be, do, or have whatever we want and actually operate as our very own gurus on this planet. In week 2, so we prayed, now what? Looking at the events that are taking place in our country, not only Las Vegas, but of course all of the weather events and the natural disasters that are taking place. We just want to take a moment and we send our love to everyone in California. We just saw a message, someone that we know personally who lost everything as of yesterday, he in Sonoma. And so we recognize that there are so many who are literally coming home to ashes, and we send them our love and our prayers. But what I talked about in that message is saying sending love and prayers is empty. It becomes a trite, habitual thing that we do. So one, do we understand what true prayer is? Because if we do, then we're going to use affirmative prayer effectively. But then I also recognize that there's more that we must do beyond just praying. And I said that our spiritual vision, our spirituality must be the catalyst for action. And so here at CSC, we understand that being spiritual people doesn't mean that we live in woo-woo land, but that we actually take those spiritual ideas and concepts and we now bring them into action. And so that's what we're doing. And that was inspired by Yogananda sharing with his time that he spent with Gandhi. And of course, we recognize that Gandhi's movement was a spiritual movement. What he did and what he was able to do was 100% informed by his spirituality. But he did not sit up in a mountain and meditate. He used that to channel it into powerful action. So as I was thinking about this week's message, I had a couple of titles, and if a working title that I had was, Let's Skip to the Good Part. And I think that kind of sums up some of what we're going to talk about today, because I recognize that as we're in the process of becoming more of who and what we are, maybe we have a vision for our life, we have a picture of what it is, but it's not the thing we're realizing, right? Maybe we have a vision for the type of relationship that we want to be in, but we don't have that relationship right now. We have a picture and a desire for the type of home we want to live in. We have a picture and desire for how much money we want to have in our bank account or the career that we want to have, right? But right now, your visible life looks nothing like that picture. And so many times we feel like, can we just skip to the good parts? Right? And I recognize that this is something that we see over and over again in our myths and in our stories. I'm wearing my Star Wars t-shirt today. I was thinking about Star Wars, and I was thinking about Luke Skywalker. And he was kind of in that place, right, where he wanted to do something bigger, and he wanted to just be a part of, working with the Force and fighting against the dark side. But he had to go through a process, right? Even as he met Obi-Wan Kenobi didn't immediately say, okay, come on, let's go and fight. Right? He began to teach him about the Force. And even after he began to use the Force and Empire Strikes Back, he meets Yoda. And Yoda is still not trying to throw him out there, but bringing him more teachings. And I'm sure, although Luke never said it in the movie, he felt like this. Can we just skip to the good parts, right? right? Now, one of my favorite movies, because again, this motif, shout out to Joseph Campbell, we know that this process exists in all stories. The Karate Kid, love the Karate Kid, right? Now, Daniel, he was dealing with some bullies, and, he wanted to impress the girl and all those good things. And so he said, if I learn karate, I can beat these guys. And so he goes to Mr. Miyagi, asking him to teach him karate. And what does Miyagi say? Paint fence, wax on, wax off. And Daniel's son wanted to skip to the good parts. Can we get to the point, right? Can we get to the good parts? But we all recognize as we watch the movie, we saw the purpose, right? That actually Mr. Miyagi was teaching him in an indirect way. And he was maturing and becoming who he needed to be in order to actually ultimately win. And, of course, that wonderful climactic scene at the end, right? And so when we look at the life of Yogananda, he was in that same place. Now, Yogananda, his given name before he became Yogananda is Mukunda. And one of the things that was interesting about Mukunda, I talked about how he had this powerful faith even as a young boy, around 7, 8 years old. And he just he just loved all things spiritual. He loved the saints and the sages and the gurus. And he was always trying to find someone to help him on his spiritual quest. So much so that his parents had to finally sit him down and just make him agree to finish high school. They're like, if you just finish high school, then you can go to an ashram or hermitage or do anything, but please just finish high school. And so he did that. And through a series of events, he ultimately meets his guru, his Yoda, his Mr. Miyagi. And his name is Sri Yukteswar. Now, that was in 1910 at the age of 17. Now, you would think this young man, after doing what his parents said, right, finishing high school, and all during that time, it's wonderful stories. I hope you all have been able to read the book. If you can't read the book, go to Netflix and watch the movie Awake, which chronicles his life, which is awesome. But during that time, he finally gets to Sri Yukteswar, and it's a beautiful way how that all happens. And again, he's 17 years old, and Sri Yukteswar tells him something he doesn't want to hear. Now again, he just agreed to his parents that he should finish high school. The other piece of this is that not only did he have this sort of spiritual yearning, but from the time he was born, there was a prophecy that was placed over his life by his parents' guru, Lahiri Mahashaya. And so he was walking around with this idea that he wanted to be close to God, and he was also walking around with this idea of there was something special about him or something unique about him, something he was supposed to do. And Sri Yukteswar confirms that. He said, there's something amazing you're supposed to do. Actually, you're going to go to the West, and you're going to take these teachings. You're going to be the first Indian saint or guru that will actually live and establish roots in America to help really crystallize this knowledge. And so you can find the clear line, the clear path that from the time that Yogananda came to America in 1920, that words that we take for granted, and things we think about with yoga, right? We can point that line from the time that he came. He was also one who embraced New Thought and spoke at National New Thought conferences back during that time. And so he had this grand vision, but what Sri Yukteswar said to him, yes, you're going to do all of these things, and yes, I'm now your guru, and it's amazing how this all happened. Now I want you to go back home and go to college. Right? He heard something that he didn't want to hear. And this is so often, I think, what happens for all of us. Again, we have this grand vision. We have this idea, home, relationship, career, whatever it may be, even what our body may look like. And then you get this word from your inner guru or external guru that says something you don't want to hear, like go to college after you made the agreement with your parents to finish high school, and he did that, right? And so what I recognize then is that this is the process of how we train our guru, our inner guru, because the truth is you are your own guru. Did we know that? But there is a training that must happen in order to come into the full realization of the guru that you are. So there are three things that happen, right? First, there's the big vision, the big idea. Then there's the letting go phase. And then finally, there's the preparation, or I just call it to whom much is given, right? And so as we look at Yogananda's life, again, I already shared it. He had the big vision. He had the big idea. He was given a big idea from the time he was born, right? And of course, then his parents reinforced it. But then he had this idea that he wanted to just be close to God. There's a beautiful story. If you go back to the message, actually it was a message I preached on The Empire Strikes Back. And I used the story of Yogananda because he was told at that time, this is when he was still young, don't try to catch God so soon. Because he was pushing after this thing. There was an inner yearning. There was an inner knowing, but he wasn't relaxed in it. He wasn't allowing it. He was trying to catch God instead of realizing that God was within him. And so he was told, don't try to catch God so soon. And what happens for many of us, we get turned on by that idea. We get turned on by that vision. We get turned on by that prophecy, whatever it is that was spoken over your life or you're spoken within you. And you're so excited about it that you want to just go out and just start doing and doing and doing and doing and doing and doing. And you hit a brick wall. It's like life saying to you, don't try to catch that vision so soon. Allow. Relax for a minute. Relax for a minute. And so then we get into this letting go phase. The letting go phase is this phase where we have to let go of how we think it's going to happen. The letting go phase is letting go of how we think it's going to happen, how we think it's supposed to happen. Again, when you look at the story of Yogananda, how he ultimately found his guru, he was in resistance to it. And there's a beautiful conversation. Once he finally comes to Sri Yukteswar, and he says, I want you to be my guru. I'm here. And he was like, oh, now finally. Oh, now you're ready. You were in resistance to me before, because that's not who he thought his guru was supposed to be. He had spent time at other hermitages and seen other saints and using different amulets and statues and praying to this one and the other one, trying to find God, trying to catch God so soon, when actually the path was being laid out, because actually his guru was showing up in different places at different moments in his life, but he was ignoring it. So when he got to this place of allowing, he had to let go of what he thought it looked like. And that's the only reason he was able to receive the word when Sri Yukteswar said to him, okay, I'm your guru now. Now go back home and enroll in school. And what he said to him was, he says, because the Western world will take you more seriously as an Indian saint and an Indian guru if they know you have a college education. Right? Because at that time, again, we're talking about 1920, right? And at that time, he was a strange Indian man in garb, right? So there was a place for him to find commonality, right? And so that was the word. And so he writes that although he didn't like what Sri Yukteswar said to him, he took it in because he had moved to this place of allowing finally. He had already moved through that place with his parents. So it was easier to receive this word at that point. And it's interesting, too, when we think about this letting go phase, it reminded me of a story from Think and Grow Rich. Shout out to Pam Grout, because she rewrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He tells the story of a man named Edwin C. Barnes. Edwin C. Barnes, who wanted to work with Edison. And he was clear, I'm going to work with Thomas Edison. And Edison at that time was, of course, one of the greatest inventors. It would be as if someone said today, I'm going to work with Elon Musk. Lofty idea. And Edwin C. Barnes wasn't a man of means. He didn't know how he was going to do this. He just got on a freight train. He couldn't afford a regular train ticket to Orange, New Jersey, where Edison was. And came to Edison and said, I'm here to work with you. Now, of course, what happens? Edison was like, okay, well, what can you do, et cetera. And he hired him to do essentially menial tasks, something that really didn't have to do with this grand, glorious vision. But because Edwin C. Barnes was so clear, he didn't back away. See, he had already moved into this place of allowing. So he knew if he was in the door, that was enough to open up the space for him to receive what it is that he wanted. And so what's interesting about the letting go phase, how he ultimately ended up working with Edison and making millions of dollars, was he found this opportunity. There was a device that Edison had created, and all of the salespeople at that time were having trouble selling it. But Edwin C. Barnes saw this device and said, I can sell this. And he was incredibly successful at selling this device when no one else was. So much so that then he engaged in an exclusive contract with Edison to be the person that sold this device. And so, of course, he made millions. But what I love, what Napoleon Hill says here, and this is, to me, what this letting go phase is about when we understand it, is he says, this is one of the tricks of opportunity. It has a sly habit of slipping by the back door, and often it comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. Perhaps this is why so many fail to recognize opportunity. So when we're in this place, what we have to recognize is it's not going to look like what we thought it was going to look like. We have to be open and recognize that sometimes opportunity shows up in a way. Sometimes it can show up here, as Napoleon Hill says, even as misfortune or a temporary defeat. Or it just may show up in clothing that was not what you expected. But when we recognize this phase, coming out of the big idea phase, which is the part that turns us on, if we're training our inner guru, this is the next phase, the letting go phase. And then finally we get to the preparation phase, or the to whom much is given phase. This is really where we receive our education. And when I say education, we have to understand what's the root of that word. If we look at education, right, educare, the Latin, which means to draw out. So the truth is, when we're being educated, when we're in that job that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what this grand vision is, something is being drawn out of us. Not drawn out in the sense of removed, but there are gifts, skills, talents, and abilities that are within you that have to be brought to bear. And what's interesting about that is when we don't resist this process, this drawing out process, which is necessary, then other gifts, skills, talents, and abilities will also show up because they've just been lying dormant behind the things you weren't already using, the things you weren't already enacting. I was reminded some years ago, I was in the barbershop and I saw a young brother walk in, and he was a safety patrol. And so he had his fluorescent orange safety patrol belt. And immediately, it was like I had completely forgotten. I was like, oh, my God, I was a safety patrol in elementary school. And I loved being a safety patrol. Y'all can see I was a safety patrol, right? And I loved being a safety patrol. But the other thing that I forgot was once you became a sixth grader, you had the opportunity to become an officer. And I became a lieutenant in the safety patrol. My best friend, Michael Hamilton, was the captain. I was the lieutenant. We were like Barack and Joe Biden. It was great. Right? It was awesome. Right? And what I remembered is once you're selected to become an officer in safety patrol, then you get to go to safety patrol camp that summer. And what did we learn in safety patrol camp? We learned about leadership. We learned about team. We learned about organizing. We learned about how to deal with the public and deal with people and have conversations and conflict resolution. At 12 years old, I was already the drawing out was already happening that prepares me for what I'm doing right here and right now. I wasn't thinking about being a pastor at 12 years old. But we recognize that these things, these moments are happening in our lives that are drawing gifts, skills, talents, and abilities out so that then we're ready when the big vision shows up. We're ready for the big idea. Take a moment to think about that. Think about all of those moments in your life where at the time it felt like, why am I doing this? This makes no sense. This makes no sense. I felt like that when I was in college at Disney World, bussing tables. And that was not my career calling to bus tables. But still, what are we learning there? We're learning work ethic, right? We're learning about doing every job with excellence no matter what it is. No matter what it is. And then what happened? Because I did such a good job at bussing tables, I was elevated. I got to go to the cash register. Right? Because I didn't complain. And actually what ended up happening was awesome. Another good friend of mine, we ended up running we had a dessert shop in the restaurant, and we made sundaes and milkshakes, and we had cheesecake, like all awesome things. We got to run the entire dessert bar, and we wrote the standard operating procedure for the dessert bar. It didn't exist till we did it, right? But that all started from bussing tables and not complaining about it and doing my very best there, right? Because again, when you use the gifts, skills, and talents that are there, that are in front of you, again, you're then making room for what the other gifts, skills, talents, and abilities are. I got you. You got to hear this. You got to hear this. And the other part about this is that there are gifts, skills, talents, and abilities within you that you don't even know you have yet. So when I'm talking about making room for gifts, skills, talents, and abilities, I'm not just talking about what you know. I'm talking about there are new things that you'll be able to do that then will become basic and rote and just everyday to you. Because you use what was already there again, and then you let it out. So now nature abhors a vacuum, something has to fill it. And so you get to learn new talents. You get to bring on new gifts, skills, talents, and abilities. Now, what did this look like in the life of Yogananda? As I said, finally, at the age of 17 in 1910, he finds his guru, Sri Yukteswar. But then he spends 5 years in college. He graduates from college in 1915. In 1917, he opens a school for boys. And it's a beautiful school because not only are they getting traditional education, but he's merging the yogic path. So they're meditating and they're practicing yoga before class, right? This is beautiful. We see this in many schools today here in this country. It's awesome. And so it's a beautiful, holistic process. And then in 1920, 10 years later, he moves to the United States. 10 years. But let's think about it, because what did he do? Once he got here, he was able to start and found the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is now a global organization. If he did not have and amass the organizational skills necessary to build that school, and of course there were stops and starts, there were mistakes, there were things he did well, things he didn't, things he had to learn, things he thought he knew that he realized he didn't know. He had to employ the service of his friends and other people. There was a moment where he had to move the school to another city. All of these skills that he was developing through this process then prepared him to come to a land that was completely foreign to him. And then everyone that he was meeting, of course, he was completely foreign to them. He was able to establish the Self-Realization Fellowship. And at the time, he was pretty innovative in what he did. The way he was using mail order would be like the way email marketing is used today. He would have been using video and everything and social media. He would have been all on Twitter, I guarantee you. What he was using at that time was the equivalent of a guru showing up here and now tweeting everybody and having thousands of followers on Instagram, right? That's what he was able to do. And so then he was able to travel all around the country and speak. He was able to establish fellowships all around the country. He also wasn't concerned about, I love this, it's one of my favorite things about him. In 1927, he was asked to speak in Washington, D.C., and of course, at that time, segregation was still the law in this country and still practiced in this country. And so he was told that his Negro brothers and sisters were not allowed to come and hear him speak. And so what did he do? He went and gathered up his Negro brothers and sisters and had a meeting with them to themselves and established a fellowship in Washington, D.C. in 1927. He said, because we are all God's children, and my brothers and sisters, my Negro brothers and sisters, are if they're seeking this truth, I want to bring this truth. And he initiated them in Kriya Yoga. These are the things that he was able to do. Beautiful, beautiful, right? But we recognize that the way he was able to stand in the world once he got here had everything to do with the way he had been trained, even across these 10 years, but really more than this. So I invite you to think about this and look at your own life right here and right now, wherever you are in the process, whether you're in the big idea phase, whether you're in the letting go phase, or whether you're in the education phase, to whom much is given, much is required. Just say to yourself, I am training my inner guru. No matter what it looks like right now, if you can't see how it's all going to work out, we affirm this all for my good. If you can't see exactly how this job is going to somehow give me something that I need for this grand vision that I have, if I can't see how this date is going to send me into the romantic relationship that I want, just say, I am training my inner guru. If you haven't arrived at the ultimate destination, if you can't make any sense from your current vantage point, just say to yourself in that moment, before the doubt, fear, and worry starts to seep in, say, I am training my inner guru. I invite everybody to stand. Yogananda's life, as he became a guru, is the path for us all. It mirrors the same path that Joseph Campbell teaches in The Hero's Journey. There's an unlearning that must happen. There's an allowing that must happen. And when I talk about this letting go, it's a surrendered place, but it's also a letting go of how you think it's going to look, what you think the path is supposed to look like, what you think the steps are going to look like. Because when you let go of that, then you can be like Edwin C. Barnes, and you can see opportunity where everyone else just sees failure. You can be like Edwin C. Barnes and even take temporary defeat and turn that into victory. I love what Napoleon Hill writes in Think and Grow Rich. He says that every defeat or every failure holds within it the seed of its equivalent success. Every defeat, every failure has within it the equivalent of its success, the seed of its equivalent success. And when you know that, that's what this letting go phase is. You're now planting the seed because you realize that it's all for my good. I'm training my inner guru. I'm moving one step closer to my grander vision. So right here and now, Mother, Father, God, we stand in complete awareness and complete gratitude for this journey, for this maturation process. We understand as we look through nature, we see that the trees go through this process. That even as their full potential is known from the time they are a seed, an apple seed, we know what it's going to be. An apple seed, we know what it's going to give. An apple seed, we know what it's going to become. But we recognize that it first must be planted in the ground. It must break open. It needs sunshine. It needs rain. And it needs the nourishments from the soil. And then it breaks forth. And it doesn't look like what it will become. But we still know exactly what it will be. And we recognize that there's a maturation process. There's a time and a growth and an allowing that it must go through before it ever gives us its very first apple. And then even as it goes through the process of giving us fruit, we know that it must be pruned. We know that it must be taken care of. We know that it must be loved on. And so we choose to recognize that if that is a natural process, then that same natural process must take place in our lives. No longer do we beat ourselves up or shame or blame ourselves or criticize ourselves if we are not there yet, if we haven't arrived. Because we recognize that we are in the process. Just as we would never shame or blame a rose bush, an apple tree, an orange tree, just as we would not shame nature, so we refuse to shame ourselves anymore. We forgive ourselves and we set ourselves free. We realize we are right where we're supposed to be. We are training our inner guru. And as we are training our inner guru, we let go of the how. As we are training our inner guru, we surrender. We exercise extraordinary trust right here and right now and realize that it's impossible from our vantage point to see the whole picture. But we recognize that there is something within us that sees the whole picture that's guiding us. We listen. There is something within us. There's our intuition. There's our inner guidance. There's our inner knowing. There's our inner guru. It's our inner truth. Call it what you will. We recognize that there's a knowing, a Christ mind within us that is doing the work and that is moving us forward. And so we let that speak to us. We recognize now that when we let go and when we listen to the words of our inner guru, we are actually moved through the process much faster. We can recognize here and now that the resistance was simply us. The slowing down had everything to do with our own thoughts. And so in consciousness, we release those brakes. And we allow you, Source, to drive. As we allow the Source within us, as we allow the Guru within us to drive, we know that all will be absolutely well and everything will happen perfectly, perfect timing, perfect order, without delay. I am so grateful and thankful for the gurus in this place. I'm so grateful and thankful to see all of the many manifestations that will take place in, through, and as your lives. And I stand with you in consciousness, knowing that you can be, do, or have whatever you want. I stand here in consciousness with you, knowing that your dream, your vision for your life is inevitable. We stand right here and now in gratitude for the inevitability of our manifestation. And together we say, amen, ashe. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you, God.